This meeting is officially called to order. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board members in attendance tonight include Director Kelleher, Director Thompson, Director David Anderson, Chair Baker, Director Lind, Director Carly Anderson, and the board is joined by Superintendent Dr. Doug Van Zyl. And we have members of the executive cabinet, including Dr. Emily McDonald. And we do have some guests tonight, too. It looks like we have Principal Sean Murphy and we have Molly Dexter. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Oh, Tabor, you're not at the table. Tabor Aiken is also here, Principal. Thank you. I just want to make everyone aware that if you noticed on our website, we did have a board member that was supposed to be dialing in tonight. They have some sick kids, so that's not possible anymore. So Bree Shinley will not be joining us. All right, so we'll move on to good news.
All right, thank you. So good news, Lakeville North speech team shines bright at the national tournament. Congratulations to our Lakeville North High School speech team on their success in the 2024 National Speech and Debate Tournament, which took place June 16th through the 21st in Des Moines, Iowa. The team earned a National School of Excellence Award, placing them in the top 20 speech programs in the country. In addition, the following students competed in the semifinal or quarterfinals: Annika Goering, Ella Rachi, Maisie Moe, Meredith Leo, and Adeline Frost. And congratulations to incoming 9th grader Elisa Godwin, who placed 7th in the country in the prose interpretation at the National Middle School Tournament. So we had a lot of folks that obviously know how to talk around here, so that's very good. Congratulations to them. Century Middle School's Rebecca Madison was selected as the Assistant Principal of the Year. If you haven't seen that, congratulations to our Century Middle School Assistant Principal, Rebecca Madison, who was recently awarded the Capital Division Assistant Principal of the Year by the Minnesota Association of Secondary School Principals. Madsen was nominated by Middle School Principal Jason Bakke for her exceptional leadership, dedication, and commitment to the success of Century students, staff, and school community. You can learn more about this award and read Principal Bakke's full letter of recommendation on our district website. Thank you for all that you do for Lakeville area schools, students. So congratulations to Becky. Highview's elementary principal Brett Lobin was recognized at the 2024 as the National Outstanding Assistant Principal in Nashville, Tennessee. Congratulations to Highview's elementary principal Brett Lobin, who was recently recognized at the 2024 National Outstanding Assistant Principal at the National Association of Elementary Principals United Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. Lobin was selected for this prestigious award last December while serving as the associate principal at Prairie View Elementary. This award is a testament to Lobin's exceptional dedication and leadership in public education. We're lucky to have Principal Lobin serving our students and staff here in Lakeville area schools. Congratulations to Brett. Lakeville South Trap Team takes home first place at state, so congratulations to Lakeville South High School Trap Team for their first place finish at the Class 8A Minnesota State High School Clay Target League Championships in Alexandria, Minnesota on June 17th. The Cougars also took second place in the 2024 State Clay Target Tournament in Prior Lake on June 22nd. Finally, all 9 members went on to compete at the National Tournament in Michigan, July 10th through the 14th. Our Lakeville North Boys Lacrosse Team took second at state. Congratulations to Lakeville North Boys Lacrosse Team for a great season. The Panthers made it to the state championship on June 15th, coming in second against Bellany St. Margaret's School Red Knights with a score of 10-18. Also, don't forget to join us for Ready, Set, Achieve. Ready, Set, Achieve is the back-to-school readiness event, and it's crazy. We're already talking about back to school stuff. That's designed to ensure every student is ready for a successful school year. It includes school supplies, immunizations, books, snack packs, and vision screenings, all free of charge. This year's event will take place August 20th from 12 to 4 p.m. at Lakeville North High School Commons. To learn more about Ready, Set, Achieve and or how you can help support by donating supplies or by volunteering, go to isd194.org/ready-set-achieve. And that's our good news for this evening.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of good news. I was just talking to Director Lynn before, saying Reagan got a silver medal today, so way to go, Reagan Smith, too. Woo! All right, so for board communications tonight, we have not had a participant for public comment or our stakeholder sessions yet this month, so there's no update on that. But if there are board members that have updates from committees that they serve on or any of the councils, that now would be a great time. Go ahead.
This is not a committee that I serve on, but I just wanted to thank the Indian community for the invitation to attend a recent dance-related event. It was Bharatanatyam. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I attended along with a couple city council members, and it was a beautiful display of traditional Indian dance. So, thank you.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Anybody else have something to share? Okay, hearing that, we'll just go ahead and move on to our agenda tonight. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
So we have a motion by Director David Anderson, but Director Thompson, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do want to add 2 agenda topics to the agenda. Do we do this after this or before?
Well, what are the topics that you?
I do want to add high school counselors fall 2024 as a topic, and then I do want to add HR audit board subcommittee as a topic.
High school counselors 2024, is that what you said?
Yep.
And then what was the other one?
HR audit board subcommittee.
HR audit subcommittee. Typically, we talk about the board committees at the working session. Would you rather have that as a working session topic?
You know what? I'd like to just bring it up here, and then we can discuss it at the next working session afterwards as well.
Okay, so to add these items to the agenda, we would need a motion and a second.
We have a motion on the table already, so I didn't need to amend the motion.
Correct.
I make a motion to amend the motion to add high school counselors fall 2024 and HR audit board subcommittee topics.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table to amend our original motion to add high school counselors 2024 and an HR audit board subcommittee to the agenda. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by Director David Anderson. Do we have any discussion on those or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote to add these items to the agenda tonight. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Nay.
So the motion carries. We have 2 noes, but then we had 4 yeses. Right? I got you, Carly?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so those items will be discussed under item 6, additions to the agenda later on for the meeting. All right. Okay. So now with our amended agenda, are there any items that board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? Director Thompson.
I would like to pull letter B, employment recommendations, leave requests, and resignations.
Okay, is that the only item?
Yes.
Okay, does any other board member have an item that they would like to discuss? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item B?
So moved.
I have a motion by Director Lind. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. Any further questions or discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we will move on to the discussion item. Director Thompson, what did you have to discuss about item B?
I've got a few questions here, and just for general awareness and transparency for myself and the community. I'm looking at page 8 in the agenda packet that we've got quite a few folks that have resigned. There was a director of equity services that has been, that did resign. Wondering if I can get an update on if there is a backfill. Did that change the organizational structure? And then what does that look like for next steps? Curious to know that.
Dr. McDonald, did you want to come forward and talk about that? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Baker, members of the board, Superintendent Van Zyl. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, first I want to lead with Anytime we have experienced change in our district, we have really utilized that as an opportunity to take a look at our current practices and whether or not we need to continue doing what we're doing or whether or not we need to make any changes. So I appreciate the question. We will have a backfill. As you know, we have 2 positions that are open, technically that will fall under teaching and learning, and that was our Director of MTSS position, our Director of Equity Services position. As we looked at the needs of the organization and we looked at where we need to go now and in the future, we have combined those positions into one position called the Director of Schools and Continuous Improvement. The purpose of this position is really to take all of the great work that we have done around equity and all of the learning and all of the growth that we have done in the district and put that into an application and implementation phase whereby we're really looking at integrating that into our systems and our processes to ensure that as we're moving forward, we are finding the best ways to ensure that all of our students get what they need when they need it to be successful in our system. I just want to say that we have done some incredible work over the past decade or 12 years in this district around equity and equitable practices. And we're at a place now where we really feel like we can move the system by looking at things a little bit differently. And we know that our MTSS work, the core of that is making sure that we are supporting all of our students to be successful and get them what they need. So our backfill will be one position again for those 2 positions, and then some shifting within what was those 2 departments. We're shifting some responsibilities and expectations around a little bit to make sure that the position is manageable, has clear expectations, and gets us where we need to go from an organizational standpoint. So, thank you for your question.
Director Thompson?
Just a quick follow-up on that one. Does that mean that there might be some financial savings just because you're reducing an existing role for another? Curious.
Right now, we're not looking at any financial savings because what we are looking at realigning what would have been that second position to support student services and special education. So the details of that aren't fully fleshed out yet, but we know we have significant needs on the student services side of the organization, and so what we're looking to do is sort of shift some resources. So it won't be an add to the budget in any way, and it won't necessarily, I don't expect any significant savings based on what we're trying to do organizationally.
Director Dr. Carly Anderson.
Yes, so question about this. So when we think about kind of the Director of Equity Services and all the liaisons, all those stay in place in terms of the school liaisons? And oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, you go.
Okay. Yes, we are not changing any of those supports currently. We are making some shifts in terms of supervision around that group, which used to be overseen by the Director of Equity Services. What we're really looking at doing is we've already met with our principals, and they're going to support us more in the area of liaison, supervision, and work direction. We do have a steering committee that is being formed. We actually just met with the principals a couple of days ago to talk about the plan and how we can help support them to have the resources in the building that they need. And then from the district standpoint, our equity coordinator, that position remains, and that person would be the district overseer, for lack of a better word, of our liaison core from a district standpoint. So we'll still maintain that sort of vision of all moving together and forward as a team, but then we'll have the principals helping support the day-to-day operations and needs of their individual buildings. So we have some work that's actively happening there, led by our equity coordinator. And I think at the end of the day, based on the conversations we had with the principals just a few days ago, we have an opportunity to really improve what we're doing, both for the liaisons and their work with our kids and our families, and for the principals in terms of what their needs are in the building. So the big takeaway from that meeting, though, was we don't have enough liaisons. So, we're gonna try to maybe plan forward for how we can do a better job there in the future.
I had one more question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering, was that role covered under the A&I funding?
Yes.
And so what happens with,
So the portion of the job can still be covered by achievement integration, and then we also have our MTSS grant that covers also a portion. So again, there really isn't any change financially in terms of how the position is funded. We're not looking at accessing any dollars at this time from the general fund because of the change of position. So based on my conversations with Bill, we're good there based on the job description and the expectations. It still meets the requirements.
Director Lind?
Do we have to modify the plan that we give to the state? Where the expenses go, do we have to do any work with that?
No, essentially, I mean, from the plan standpoint, the only thing that really changes is the title. So, and that's true of the MTSS grant as well. So the work is still the same to pretty much the same degree. The intentions of the plan are still the same. There's only, as you know, there are 3 portions of the achievement and integration budget, and where we can spend our money, and that there is a portion allocated to that director's salary, which will go for the portion of this position. It's just a change in title.
Thank you.
Dr. Van Zyl?
And it really, as Emily and I and the executive team walk through this, the issue for us is MTSS and equity should not be other things to do. They should be what we do on a daily basis and embedded in what we do. So by bringing it under the teaching and learning umbrella, by having our administrators supervise those liaisons, that's where they're doing their work anyway. Those are the types of things that we're trying to accomplish through this adjustment, to be able to say, these aren't things that need to work in isolated silos. They need to be embedded and dovetailed with one another in what we do on a daily basis. So they're not seen as separate items, but they're all components together.
Director Thompson?
I do have another question, but I'll pause here if there's any other questions from the board regarding this one. Okay. Second question that I have is that I noticed that there were 2 key executive director positions that have been placed. So again, for those that may not have known, Stephanie Cass was our communications director. She has moved on, and a big thank you for her work and her effort. I noticed that we have a new executive director of student services, Michelle Humphreys, and then our new communications director, Grace Olson. So congrats and welcome to the team. I did notice here on the employment list that there is a interim special education director that was hired. Just want to make sure that with Michelle Humphrey being the new person, she doesn't start until August 5th. Was she involved in that process and in that decision making for that role?
Dr. Van Zyl?
Yes, she was.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Question 4 on 15 on the enrollment in the recommendation pages. I am seeing a higher variance of special education paraprofessionals being relocated from their current roles to new positions or different locations. There's over like 20 of them. Can you just provide an update so that folks who may happen to be reading page 15 may ask questions?
Absolutely. I think what we need to remember is when we're talking specifically about special education paraprofessionals, those staff go with the students based on what the students' needs are. So depending on where the students are, where the programs are, what the needs are, how they're identified in their IEPs, those supports are placed based on what the students' identified needs are. So, oftentimes we'll see some movement. I do have to say that I'm very pleased to see all of the hires in that area because, as we know, that has been a challenge, and we have a little more work to do in that area. Just over 20 staff in that area yet to hire, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of the individual education plan of each student, and that directs where those staff go and with whom they work.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay.
No.
Go ahead, Director Thompson.
And then the last question that I have is on page 22, changes in assignment for LASA staff. I am seeing 2 individuals that have moved from dean of students to assistant principals. Just want to make sure that I understand. Do we no longer have deans, or how did APs get started?
Yeah, so as we have been able to restructure, and we have Principal Murphy here too, if he would like to weigh in, but as we have moved to restructure to be able to provide counselors to our students for the first time, and as long as I've been here, which is a long time, the roles of the deans have shifted. And so in the past, they were called deans, and then they were called deans/APs. And so we're moving to just the AP title because the focus of their work will really be around that assistant principal job description. And our counselors then would help serve our supports for our students in their academic planning and in other areas of need that they may have. So in order to delineate those jobs and what they do to provide clarity for not only for the staff but also for our families, those positions have dropped the dean part of their title and will be referred to moving forward as assistant principals.
Director Thompson?
So I'll pause on my next question around if you can provide more clarity around the difference between the two. So when we get to the levy question, maybe we can discuss it then around what is an assistant principal? How is that different from a counselor? But we may want to discuss it at the levy topic then. I'm okay with that. Or if you want to do it now, that's fine.
Yeah, let's have Principal Murphy, since
Yeah.
we're on the topic, he can respond to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chair Baker, and Board, Dr. Van Zyl. Essentially, the major difference is deans were doing the jobs of assistant principal and counselors in a traditional high school setting. And so now they're dropping some of the counselor duties, primarily looking at scheduling, so changing student schedules, which is very time consuming, and then counseling students in career decisions, college decisions, post-secondary opportunities. Those are more in the counselor realm of expertise. So they're giving up those duties to focus more on instructional leadership and more disciplinary behavior management, positive behavior approaches, et cetera. So those are the major differences. We do have a matrix that we can share with you that you can see kind of the job duties and what was prior to now that we're onboarding counselors, what's been given up. So that's a good visual if you'd like to have that eventually as well. Yeah.
So for deans and counselors, like counselors would only work during the school year, and then deans would have that extended contract, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sean, can I just ask you, because
Yeah.
we did discuss all of this during our work session, but instructional leadership, can you just explain now that you're talking to our community as well, what that entails? Because that's a big part of their job.
Yeah, our teachers are struggling for help. They do professional learning communities every Wednesdays. Our deans try to make it to everything, but they're balancing everything from student needs to teacher needs to behavioral issues.
And observations.
In observations, teacher observations. So they're really stretched thin in some of those areas. Each dean would oversee different academic areas they'd be assigned to, and they just weren't able to do everything on their plate and get to the needs and help teachers do what they need in their meetings, et cetera, because they were so consumed. If there was one student issue that would take up half their morning that they didn't expect, they might miss that PLC meeting and might not be able to help foster some of those big conversations with curriculum, et cetera, that the traditional assistant principal would have. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Director Thompson?
So we've got 4 soon, they were deans, but now they're labeled as assistant principals in each high school.
Yep.
And then I believe we have 2 then assistant principals in each middle school, because they were formerly deans. And then we have 3 current counselors starting this fall in each high school, and then we have 1 counselor in each middle school at the moment, is my
Is
understanding.
that correct?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then just one more, just to make sure I understand this. Assistant principals would be assisting with behavioral support, behavior scenarios, evaluations, and assistant principaling throughout the day. So just want to make sure. And then the counselors are going to be focused on academic advising, career readiness, college readiness, and some additional support for staff or for students if where applicable.
Yep.
Okay, so very clear delineation. So if my son wanted to change his class schedule, he would then go to one of the 3 counselors, not to the dean. But if he threw a French fry during lunch class, he would be talking to a dean. I'm sorry, an assistant principal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely, you got it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not saying it was a real example, but it's your credit, so.
Thank you.
I think that's good. Do you have any further questions, Director Thompson?
I do have one more. Yep.
It's still related to the.
It is,
the
yep.
dean?
So it'd be the next page, page 23. I do just, because I don't know the employment cycle, and I'm seeing that we've got 86 positions open, and school starts like, I don't know, 35 days. And so we've got 4 elementary teachers open, 11 licensed specialists, 22 special education roles that are still open, and 31 staff support. When we have 1,500 roughly 1,300 full-time or staff. I want to be mindful that this is almost 5% of our workforce not officially hired. And how do we have alternative paths? What are we doing? Just a quick, I was curious if 89 is considered super high.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't want to speak to for our Executive Director of Administrative Services, who has expertise in this at a higher level than I do. What I can say is that I can't speak specifically to whether or not that's high. What I do know is that every year our hiring does go into late August. That's pretty standard. Things do change. Oftentimes, you have positions that haven't been filled, and or you have people that maybe decide to move in August, and then you have an opening. So there's a lot of reasons for those openings. I will say that the people that are doing the hiring, so that's primarily if you're talking about building staff, our principals have been working tirelessly, and they have been working collaboratively to try to move through that interview process and make multiple selections and making sure staff are placed in the appropriate spot for their skill set. And I know that does take a lot of their time, but they're moving as fast as they can to try to get some things filled. We're having some good success, as you saw, in the area of special education. We had a little bit of a pause because we had some changeover in staff, but now that we have some people in the right seats, we're seeing that accelerate a little bit too. So, obviously we're hoping to have all of our positions filled, but we'll continue to monitor that and, support where we can to get as many of them done as we can.
Director Thompson?
Just the last follow-up is that what happens if we don't get these roles filled? Like what do we do? Is it a state requirement? Is there, because I know that substitution, teachers on call is for substitute teachers. Just curious, with 22 special education roles open, is there a state requirement, or where do we go to get them?
We don't have any state requirements around that, but certainly we would have to get creative. Anytime we have a teaching position open, we want to put the most highly qualified teacher into that position. We have done a variety of things specific to the special ed area, and that might be doing some combinations, moving some students and staff around to some degree, to the degree that we can. I know that they have done some contracting services for particular things when needed. That's not an ideal scenario. And then, of course, we have our teachers on call, and our teachers can work a certain number of days before we would have to basically put a new person in there. So we have used that as well. We try not to do that for any long period of time if we can, but it certainly buys us a little more time if we're looking for somebody. So it's really dependent on the situation and the position on how we would respond to that, but we would respond in some way depending on what was needed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Is that everything for that item?
It is.
Okay, so do we have a motion to pass employment recommendations, leave requests, and resignations?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Lind. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Director Kelleher. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda, we don't have any reports tonight, but we do have reports with recommended actions. It would be the resolution calling the addition of a levy to the November ballot. Is that being presented by
Emily and I. Well, it's going to start with me and then Emily, and then I've got Tabor and Sean here as well in case they need to chime in. So I think he's going to pull up the slides for us. If you remember last work session, Peter Leatherman was here, shared some information with you regarding a survey, where that fell. So we've got a couple of slides here in a second that will get up, and I'll keep talking. Do you have the slides that you can pull up back there? There we go. Here we go. So as you take a look at this, you can go ahead. I don't have the clicker, so you're going to have to move it for me, I guess, from the back room, or is the clicker here? It's right. Oh, Emily, you've got it. All right. So as you took a look at as I was talking about, Peter Leatherman was here, conducted the survey, some things that he tested. They did test the max amount of an operating levy, which was $491 per pupil unit. That generates $6.4 million, roughly $18.5 a month for a house that's $400,000. Some other things that were tested as they were talking about what the community would support for staff, or staff for counseling, tutoring, behavior intervention, as well as special education and early childhood programs. That was one of the main things, if you remember, he read as far as here's some of the things that they talked to the community about, and the community seemed to support that. Then from that, what they learned is that 65% of respondents said they would support that request. You can see over on the side kind of the chart as far as strongly support, where that was in regard to this ask and the time before. If you remember, we did an ask earlier in the spring. They wanted to see how that had played out in regard to negotiations, some other things, if there were some major changes in that. And you can see for the most part, it remained very stable. Some of the things that we wanted to make sure people knew were the reasons for support. You can see those items that are listed there in the chart. Some additional insights that he mentioned for those that weren't able to be a part of it. Just the top reasons people would support this levy was to help attract and retain teachers. And as Emily kind of talked about in the items that you were talking about from the consent agenda, a majority of the things that we are proposing or talking about are items that not only support our students, but our staff supports. When you're talking about counselors, when you're talking about behavior folks, when you're talking about those particular areas, those are things that many other districts have and are used to help support their staff. Some other top reasons why people maybe would oppose a levy, of course, inflation and cost of living are big items that are there. However, people started reporting that they're feeling a little bit less financial pressure as those areas are lessening a little bit. But we also know from what Peter shared and we talked about, district residents still need some more clarity about district finances. What exactly can you spend dollars on? Where do those dollars come from? Where can they go? What are they going to be used for? So that's part of the messaging that he said we needed to make sure people were aware of. So then through our conversation at the work session, one of the things that we talked about, there was 3 areas that we kind of had broken things down into, and we're looking at going to the max. But from that meeting, a majority of people kind of gave the thumbs up to, let's not necessarily ask for the max, but how could we reshape this in some way, shape, or form, which gets to that kind of sweet spot of $12.50 a month on a $450,000 home, which is $300 per pupil unit. And as much as we want to be able to change some of the ballot language and be able to explain that, we really can't. That's basically how those things have to be written by statute. But what could those funds be used for were the things that we were talking about at our last meeting, and we had quite a healthy discussion about that. So the items that are listed there, again, these are not items that you want to put on the ballot, but these are things that people need to know through the communication, how they would help support our students, how they would help support our staff. So by adding an additional counselor at each high school, you could use those dollars. Implementation of data-informed models to support teachers in meeting academic, social, emotional behavior needs of students at the middle school level. With that, you would need 2 additional counselors and a social worker at the middle school. Adding a behavior interventionist at each elementary school and at pre-K. That was something that somebody asked, and we want to make sure that people understand that's a pre-K. And I know Emily has spent a lot of time over there this year, and I know Molly's sitting over there as well. I think that's one of the items that our folks talk about is how can we get some additional behavior help and support for some of our youngest students. So we wanted to make sure that was included. Then a couple items that are kind of add backs or restoring the digital media specialist positions to 1 full-time at each elementary and 1 at each middle school. And then restoring elementary art and music specialists 2 full-time positions at each elementary school. So when you do all those things and add them up, I think the next slide shows it. Nope, go back. Sorry. That basically takes us to the max amount of that $300 per pupil unit. And when I have that in front of me, that is roughly that $4 million that was mentioned before. So it says there on that first line, $300 per pupil unit generates roughly $4 million. That's taking the secondary counselors, social workers, and supports the elementary folks, and then those other staff that left off that other section that we had talked about at the work session as well. But so by doing that, as we had chunked those things out, those 2 areas would be able to be done, and it would fit within this dollar amount that you said you wanted to be kind of the sweet spot. But we did also want to remind you, as we talked about in the next slide, we could go out several more years, but we wanted to remind you that there are some upcoming things that are going to be on the ballots at some point that you as a board get to decide about. So by not doing something now, which you could choose not to do, there's still going to be other things that are coming down the pike that are either going to be piggybacked on or doubled up on. You can see if we do something in November, and we have to remind people operating levies can only happen in November. You can't do them any other time of the year. So if you were to say, hey, we don't want to do an operating levy now, you're waiting for another year. And then remember, when you do an election in November, you're waiting from November until the following July to start collecting those dollars. So it's almost another year. Then we have the board election, possible bond referendum in the spring to talk about middle school space. And then the reminder that we do have some renewals and some operating of capital levies and renewals for an operating levy again next November. So if for some reason we didn't do a levy this November and you wanted to do something next November, you already got a couple of renewals that are there on the ballot as well. So that's kind of a small, concise snapshot of what we kind of talked about. I know Dave and Kim, you weren't able to be there, but I think they sent, and I think Bill sent you the information and said if you had questions to reach out to him. I knew you got the information, but that's why I kind of condensed it down a little bit to give you some time to have some conversation. So really what we're looking at is the $300 per pupil unit, $12.50 a month on a $450,000 home. In those areas, the counselors at the high school, middle school, social worker at the middle school, elementary behavior interventionist, and then the restoring of those positions of the media specialist and the art and music positions at the elementary schools. Now, I would point out, and I think we talked about this briefly, that by restoring some of these positions to full time, there may be some additional time in their schedule that we're going to have to negotiate and try to figure out how to utilize that time, because if you only have X number of classes for an art teacher to teach and he or she has a period or 2 open, you can utilize those staff members within the building to do something else. So that's how those positions would be filled. So that's what we're looking at. What you asked us to bring back to you from the work session was that dollar amount in those areas. So that's what we provided to you. If you have specific questions, I know Tabor's here, can answer about behavior folks. Sean's here about the secondary counselors and other supports that our staff and students would get in those areas as well. And Molly's here from the early learning, not that I'm going to put her on the spot, but she's here as well. I don't want to forget her either. So with that, questions that you have, or Emily, anything else that you want to add that I didn't mention?
No, I think you covered it.
I have a question. So it says that the early child is getting just the behavior interventionist, and that's really all the support that early childhood is getting with this levy. Is there a need for like a social worker at the early childhood level, or do they have something like that already?
Molly, if you want to come up to respond to that. What I will say is that Molly and I have spent some time engaging the staff over at CLEC in, well, we called it some visioning meetings. And really, it was partly about what do we envision, what's our dream for early childhood in Lakeville area schools, and what do our kids need. And then we kind of did a little bit of a needs assessment. So like, what do you need? What's going well? That sort of thing. One of the things that really rose to the top, aside from the fence, which we have taken care of, is the need to have an additional support person. So that's how in our conversations around the levy, as we are looking to be a pre-K 12 system, We thought having consistent supports pre-K and then through our elementary school would not only meet the needs of the priorities of the staff, but also be a resource that they haven't had access to in the past. So I'll turn it over to Molly to answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Baker and Board and Dr. Van Zyl. So yes, we do currently have a family outreach support specialist in the building that does help with reaching out to the community for early learning. A social worker has also been in discussions in the past, and this role currently supports that. The behavioral interventionist, we currently have one that is shared between early childhood and elementary.
Okay.
We did for 1 year have that person in the building for early childhood
Yep.
full-time, and then with budget cuts, we did not see that as a full-time position. So that would be recovering that as a full-time position at CLEC.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just think of like how unique that early childhood experience is, and a lot of those community supports are just really important in those first few years. So I was just curious if you had the social worker at that level. So thank you. I appreciate that.
We are really grateful for the support and the recognition of how important early childhood is, and it is very important to see those things start at the early learning level so we can
Awesome.
hit them
Thank you.
early. All right. Thank you.
Director Lind?
I don't have a question, but I think I might be able to answer a question. The question might be why of going out for an operating levy. And I remember back in, I don't know, a few months ago, we had a meet and confer, and I asked the union people what was the biggest challenge they had in their schools. And it was unanimous. It was student self-regulation. And we know that behavior issues affect achievement big time. And just today, there's an article out that that was published. I'm not sure where, but I read it online. But it's true. It was a study that was done. It said that nearly a third of all adolescents in the United States received treatment for their mental health in 2023. A third, which is up quite a bit from 22 and 21. The most common treatment, it said, was outpatient treatment that included school counselors, and so it rang a bell. And I know we have the need, and it's not just Lakeville, and it's not Minnesota, it's nationwide.
Right.
And that's, I think, the main reason we're going out for this right now. Thank you.
Director Kelleher?
Terry, thank you for those comments. One part of the survey is the support that it showed the support that this community has for the education. And I know in the 28 or 29 years I've been on the board, our number one reason that people move to Lakeville has been for the schools. And whether you have kids in school or not, a strong school system is valuable because if you've got kids in the school, obviously you want them to have a strong system. But if you don't, it is your home values. And we know we have people always talk about how their taxes keep going up, but so does the value of their homes and their assets because of the strong schools. But the one thing I think is important to note is we're always going out to ask for additional dollars because that's what's required by the state for us to be able to support the systems and the programs that our community is expecting. But what we don't always see is how some of these dollars, just like our bond referendums eventually come to an end and fall off. And so if you look at over the last 30 years or even longer than that, we try to keep the tax rate very flat for our community. So if you do see increases, it's typically because your value is going up. And we do know we have some bond referendums that will be falling off in, I think Bill said, end of 2024-25 school year, or 2025. Yep, 2025 school year. So although we are asking for dollars, we do have dollars that do fall off on the back end when they are done.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I think, Director Keller, you're right. I mean, we have levies, and just for clarity, you have a levy, you have an operating levy that funds how a school operates, and you have bonds, which is for more capital projects, and they come from a different pool of funding. when we think about how much money that we're going to invest in our education system here, I mean, the community already pays 27% of the overall $208 million budget. So that's $57 million. Now, while the state allows us to tax up to a certain threshold, I believe it's like $3,000 per pupil, we have roughly $6.5 million of taxing authority at the district level. Now, that does not mean we have to spend all
It's
$6.5 million.
unused. That's unused, right?
That's 6.5 million that's unused.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase it, 6.5 million that the district would tax the community to fund additional operating opportunity, could tax
Yeah.
other opportunity things. And so I just want to be mindful that we're really thoughtful around what we bring to the community, but also with 6.5 million available that we could tax, where does that go, and how do we make sure that we have the best impact for all students, the most ROI for the things that we put out for the community to vote on. I am aware that behavioral issues is a huge component at the elementary level, at middle school level, and so forth. We are, from what I heard last week, the elementary behavioral resources is estimated about $1 million, so about $994,000 for 8 resources. They have to be licensed. Let me rephrase that. That is a request to have a licensed behavioral specialist, and between benefits and their compensation that they could potentially fall under, which is the EML contract, we're allocating roughly $142,000 per person for a behavioral specialist. And so if they are in an elementary building that has 500 to 600 students, we've got one person that manages, let me rephrase that one person to provide guidance and behavioral intervention for the students that might need that, and for of the 500 to 600 students in an elementary building. So I've sent this email yesterday or a couple days ago. Mr. Domston shared his point of view of having behavioral specialists that are considered licensed, and that is why the estimate of $1 million is warranted for eight individuals, again, for them to manage the 600 plus elementary students. Candidly, I don't know if that seems realistic, but that's how it's presented. Is this the only path we have? Are there other school districts that have a different model, leveraging maybe a Leaf Union staff resource that might have that? I'm just wondering, can there be 2 individuals that we could leverage within each elementary building that can provide the same, if not similar, end results? Because, if a person gets sick, then they're not there, then we don't have a behavioral specialist. I'm just wondering, are there alternatives, or what are the pros and cons that we need to have a behavioral specialist in this category versus another? That's my unknown.
Dr. Van Zyl?
Couple of things, and I'll ask Tabor to maybe step forward a little bit so he can speak to it too. Now, I guess I would say this: you're not relying on just the behavior interventionist. The behavior interventionist is also teaching skills and giving supports to our teaching staff. So the teachers are also learning skills to be able to support students on a daily basis as well. So it doesn't just fall to Tabor, and it doesn't just fall to the behavior interventionist within the school. It's the whole family of the school that does that. So this person is providing support. Plus, and Tabor, you can speak to this, on a daily basis with 500 to 700 students in the building, not all 500 to 700 students are dysregulated. So you have some frequent flyers, you have some folks that are maybe on the edge that need some help and support. So it's also being proactive instead of reactive to situations with how behavior interventionists can interact. And so maybe, Tabor, if you want to touch base on that a little bit, and if you don't agree with me, say, yeah, I don't agree with that, and share your experience, because your boots on the ground in the building with your staff as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. I do agree with you, and specifically the components that you talked about, Dr. Van Zyl, are integral. And with a behavior interventionist, another way to think about that title would be a behavior specialist, because our classroom teachers, specifically our classroom management, especially at the elementary level, they have great expertise in classroom management, math instruction, and reading instruction. This particular individual in a behavior specialist role really has that focus and that on those behavior needs that aren't very common, that might spike up and might be something that, oh, we haven't seen that before. How are we going to respond to that? This individual would be able to help take that lead and do that. And so then they're working in that proactive or in that reactive situation there, but also the proactive in that they realize that that specific need, they're able to do some education on that specific need with staff so that everyone can better respond to the needs as they see them come up, but also do proactive pieces with students. And specifically, we've had great success in our district and our buildings with PBIS. Positive behavior interventions and supports. That would be a spot where that individual could be a specific point person for that work. And then that's really that proactive teaching of what we expect and what we want to see. And that individual has that skill set and is able to refine that and really own that program. Whereas right now, that's part of somebody else's job. And then I would just reinforce what Dr. Van Zyl said as well, that it's part of the team. So for example, if the principal's not there, the building doesn't stop working. The building continues to work. If the principal's at a meeting or out sick or whatever it might be, that continues to work. And that would be the same as with the behavior specialist, a behavior interventionist, that they're part of the team. And specifically at the elementary level, when we talk about classroom teachers, these are individuals with very broad shoulders because they're carrying an immense amount of responsibility and support for each one of their students. And so then there's other individuals like the principal, like the learning specialist, the behavior interventionist, that are providing support as it's needed in very specific and unique areas.
Dr. Lind?
I think a key to what you said is really important. You're proactive rather than being reactive, and that's where the success will be. Thank you.
Director Carly Anderson?
I just want to provide some reinforcement for what has been discussed so far. You know, I was just thinking about what Director Lind brought up a little while ago about the article. There's been a lot of articles coming out about mental health with kids and what's going on right now in our generation. And I feel like there's these two camps where there's a lot of emphasis on social media and phones and things like that, which I know we're going to talk about phones in our schools and policy coming up, but also, you know, can kids tolerate the same amount of distress, or are there different stressors, and how do we teach them how to regulate emotions? And so, one, I think these behavioral interventionists are great ideas just because I do think they probably have a higher level of expertise than someone who, you know, if you got two people who are at a lower level of knowledge around these things. And also I was just looking into just what some other Twin City area schools are doing with this. And one thing I'll share is I just looked at Wayzata, and they have 4 AP. So granted, their school is twice the size, their high school, but they have 4 APs and 4 deans, which is funny that we're talking about the differences there. And then they have 12 counselors. So, you know, we're shooting for 4 per high school, so that would make a total of 8. So we're getting there. But to me, when we were talking about the just lack of counselors in our schools and how those teams can really help to, when they get on teams for groups of students at the high schools, how that just helps promote success. And so one thing I think is really important as we're communicating about this, obviously we know the communication is really huge, but how does addressing all of this indirectly affect achievement, like you brought up, which I think is what people don't exactly always make that connection. So thank you.
Director Kelleher?
Yep. So I'm going to jump on your bandwagon because that's where I was going to go. Ultimately, when we talk about the need here, it's the mental health support, it's the support for our teachers, it's to reduce the behavioral interruptions and stuff. But Tabor, I don't know if you can speak to what that would mean, but ultimately the goal here is to improve the learning environment and student achievement, whether it's elementary, middle school, or a high school. What this levy is intended to do is to target our strategic plan of increased student achievement. So do you have comments or from your perspective, what all of this would do for student achievement and an improved learning environment?
Well, I think you know the answer to that question. Yes, I do, Director Keller. I have plenty of input on that. I'll talk about the behavior interventionist piece specifically. One of the key components that we know are relationships, and that having those relationships, I got to be here a little bit before the meeting and chat with several of you, and we have those relationships. We got to just chat and have some small talk, some conversation, and it was, from my perspective, enjoyable. That's a positive relationship. The behavior interventionist helps facilitate that, and specifically by bringing that in. A question that might be asked is, well, what if my child doesn't have a specific behavior need that's unusual, and they tend to do well in class, they don't need a lot of redirection or things like that? That's fantastic. There are students that do, and that's a part of that dynamic in the classroom. This particular role is adding support for that classroom teacher at the elementary level to be able to continue to do that lesson and know that they've got a little bit of backup maybe, or a little bit of extra support, somebody who specializes in that specific need at that time. A way that we talk about it in the building often is comparing behavior needs with academic needs, because that's what we consistently work on. Behavior needs are part of that work. They're part of that environment. They're not an outlier. They're different than maybe a reading disability, but they're in the same camp, and that's what we're working on is supporting that individual child, which is then, of course, part of our school community and our overall community at large. So I believe that those pieces go in. I would expand it a little bit, since you gave me the opportunity, and just add to the art and music pieces, that also helps facilitate that culture. Right now, our STEM specialists at the elementary level are full-time in each site. So a significant portion of their day is teaching classes. They're a specialist, and at the elementary level, that means they're teaching the entire class of students. So for example, a second grade class of students, while that classroom teacher has their prep time as it's allocated through the EML contract. And the STEM specialist spends most of their day in that teaching environment. However, they also have time to integrate that and do some specific pieces to supplement, like we've seen some partnerships with QA1 as a district, where they've been able to go a little bit more than the time in a specific structure allows. And I would envision that with art, and we had done this with music in the past, where we had music specialists, music teachers, and they had a little more time in their day, so that when they were outside of the specialist specifically, they spent a lot of time doing concert preparation and meeting with students so they could do some extra practice and get some extra time together. And I would see that being similar with our art, is they're just building those connections. Maybe it's that student who just thrives in art, and this is the place for them. They get that extra time to do some of those pieces. And again, it just builds that strong school community.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So just a quick question, because I want to give like the full background of this, because obviously you have PBIS already built in. This is something that you're working on. So this is just like another piece of the puzzle for the behavior work that you have been completing as a district. So can you kind of speak to what kind of model you're working with, that there are interventions that the behavior interventionists would be doing? It wouldn't just be like adding a staff member and then we have to build from the ground up. Like, you've already built the ship, right, around the behaviors. Because I know you've done some work with Clay Cook, conscious discipline. I'm trying to think of all the different things in my head that I know the district's done. Like, I know, I'm just saying, like, it's not just like adding a staff member and then we have to add all of the other programs with it. Like, you've done the pre-work for it. Now we just need this last piece of the puzzle. And is that kind of how I'm understanding that correctly?
That would be, I would agree with that understanding. Okay. A number of the components that you're describing are there, they're functioning. They might be being led by a different individual, for example, the principal, the counselor, the learning specialist. In many cases, and I specifically, of course, think of Eastview, we have teachers, classroom teachers or specialists that are leading some of that work as part of their assignment, and they volunteered to do that, sometime taking away or being out of the classroom for professional development, but they're championing that particular piece like a PBIS. In this case, where I would see the behavior interventionist coming in, is now they're the champion for that. And so there's a little bit of a shift, but there really isn't, I don't see that we would need to recreate or develop new programming. It's programming we have up and running. We simply are going to be able to take it to a higher level because of that level of ownership that the behavior interventionist will bring.
Thanks. Director Thompson?
I'm not in an elementary classroom, so I don't know when we say behavioral interventionists, behavioral specialists need to get engaged. And so can you give me a few examples of like how disruptive is that? Do all the kids have to leave the classroom, or and what is the percentage of our students that might need this? Are we looking at like less than 10? Are we looking at 15? But where their actions might drastically impact the entire day of a classroom? I'm just trying to understand the level of impact, the level of severity of this. I get it, but I'm just looking to learn more of what happens in the classroom and how does that impact the other students, if there's a few examples that you might be able to share.
The range is going to be, from a 0 to 60 kind of a piece. Yes, there are opportunities when the classroom teacher has to take the class, except one student out, and is looking for support from an individual. For example, we had, some of our buildings had assistant principals. That individual or a principal might be coming in, the counselor might be coming in, somebody else to support a specific student who is dysregulated and needs some intense support. And that student might be able to leave as well, and that could be another option. But it's very difficult to pin it down to a percentage. I would also say, as a former assessment coordinator, I don't have that number, so I'm not going to try to get you one, because I just don't know it. And so I don't want to pick some number out of the air and say it, but it's there. It's a constant part of just the classroom, and it's a result of bringing a large group of people together and working to meet the needs of those people. In this case, they're elementary students. So there's that range of needs, and then back to the relationship. That's where I see this behavior interventionist building those relationships, and so that we can start to learn for this, for a particular student. And I, of course, in my head have several in mind that I can visualize, and I'm not going to, of course, but I could tell you their names, and I know who they are. And over time, we learned those needs better and what worked well for them and what didn't work well. We were able to support them, support the teacher, support other students in the classroom in meeting those specific, very individualized needs. And I see that behavior interventionist as someone that would facilitate that. And again, they would take that role. That's something that, for example, I've done, and that they're going to specialize and be able to focus on that and have those connections. That's not going to be their entire day. Their entire day isn't going to be waiting for Tabor to be dysregulated and then go. They're going to be in classrooms. They're going to be in the cafeteria. The two areas that we know at the elementary level that can be challenging because there's less direct supervision is the cafeteria and the playground. That's an area where this person could be. They could be helping to organize activities. They can be in classrooms delivering lessons and supporting classroom teachers. They can simply be visible in the building and helping to make those connections. So one of the pieces that we consistently work on is having those relationships so that when you get to interact with someone, there's already a familiarity, and you're not having to introduce yourself, for example, and say, "Hi, I'm Mr. Aiken, I'm the principal." And they're like, "I've never seen you before." No, they have seen me before. They know who I am. There's that connection. And so then that moves the problem solving or the challenge forward a little bit faster. I think if it's okay, while I have the microphone, one of the questions that was brought up as well was discussion around the level. For example, is it a paraprofessional through our LEAF group? Is it a teacher or an interventionist, which would be through EML? Another one that we haven't talked about would be as an administrator, as an assistant principal in that role as well. And I believe that the behavior interventionist teacher, someone through the contract, is the appropriate level for that. Part of that person's role is going to be homeschool communication, contacting a family and talking about something that might be happening. Our paraprofessionals don't do that. So then that process would fall to the principal, possibly the classroom teacher, but the behavior interventionist is able to own that. Mm-hmm. The behavior interventionist is also a teacher. So when they're working with teachers, they can teach their colleagues, and they are also in a spot where they are able to, say, lead a whole group lesson with a group of students, with a class of third graders, for example. A paraprofessional, that's not their role. They would work to support a classroom teacher or somebody else in doing that, but they're not going to be able to specifically host that lesson because that's outside of their capacity as a paraprofessional.
I was just going to say that when you brought up assessment, it made me think about how much assessment goes into prior to any academic year, where you're getting information about the kids that are coming into the classrooms, and then the teachers get all this information. And part of that is to make sure there's balanced classrooms with regard to multiple different things, right? So the assessment part of that is very important, to make sure there's balanced classrooms in terms of needs, and then you just have kind of eyes on what's going on, right? I appreciate the process.
Director Thompson?
I've got additional questions on other topics, but I'll pause here if there's any more on this. But I do appreciate all the information that you've shared. It was helpful.
Thank you.
Can I just reiterate one thing that Principal Aiken said that I think is really important? I think when we hear the term behavior interventionists, we immediately go to extreme behaviors, high levels of dysregulation, a small portion of the students in our system. But what I want to just reiterate is that this person not only deals with those situations, but also works in our PBIS system, which is around positive behavior, which is engaging all kids in positive behaviors. It's building those relationships, and it's working side by side along teachers to support them. And most importantly, I don't want to forget that when we have somebody that has the capability and the skill to be able to do this high level of work at a high level, number one, they can help slow or stop some of the dysregulation by teaching skills. They have opportunities to engage sometimes with, if there's a peer-to-peer interaction that is not extreme, that kids need to kind of work through alongside of a counselor because they're part of the team. And they allow the principal then to be the principal. Our elementary principals don't have the supports that some of our other buildings have. And so anytime anything occurs in the building, they are generally the first person running to take care of that issue, which means they have less time to support teachers, they have less time in classrooms, they have less time to be able to work through the vision and mission of the district and that strategic work. So having a team of people with expertise that they can rely on gives us more benefit than just helping a student on an individual day that may become highly dysregulated. So I just don't want to lose sight of that because I just think that there's a place we go when we hear the term behavior specialist. So that's it.
Do you have a question?
Oh, not on this topic. But.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so my next question is around the high school counselors. And so I know we talked about it briefly earlier. Just to recap, these are individuals that are on the EML contract. They are going to be providing academic advising, career readiness, college readiness, and can I make an assumption that they will be meeting with every high school student twice a year, almost like a financial advisor, to say, how's it going, where are you going, what are you doing next? I just want to, we're good there.
Yeah, you're on the right track, exactly. And I've tried to explain this to some people, and for me, it comes back to, I was at the DMV the other day trying to get my license renewed, and there was 20 people in line, and there's one worker. And I'm sitting there waiting, and all my thoughts start going through my head, and I'm like, God, if there was two workers, half the time I'm waiting here, and et cetera. Well, our students have spoken loud and clear that when I first started in the district over 20 years ago, I think our caseloads for the deans were at about 240, and Judy probably remembers that. They've grown to close to, we'll use easy math because both high schools are creeping on 2,000 students, and we're growing, we know that, which is a good problem to have. But our deans now have gone from caseloads around 250 20 years ago to 500 students for simple math, roughly. Okay, well, that's a lot to manage for one person. And counselors now will take some of that burden and meet with students and give them the services they need, like you said, on a more frequent basis. My daughter's going to be a senior at Lakeville South this year. And her friends will often come to me as the principal for schedule issues. Well, why are they doing that? They're doing that because they can't get in to see their dean because the line is out the door. And everybody who's been in either high school has seen that, that the line is through the door, especially in the fall and at semester change. And it can be frustrating for parents. So the levy will help alleviate some of that, and a lot of it's just being good stewards of our money. So where do we get our most bang for our buck, and how do we make a system so people aren't waiting in line, people can get the services they need, and that's what we're aiming to do. And so hopefully, yeah, a counselor can meet with students on a more frequent basis, because they're not getting pulled from maybe a severe behavior that happened or investigation on social media that we all love, which the deans has to do. They can keep their appointments and meet with these students on a more frequent basis and give them the needs they need, not only the counseling day-to-day life, but also, most importantly, just planning for the future. So yes, that's what we want.
Dr. Van Zyl?
I think the other component, Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it also helps our staff, because our staff now have another person to be able to go to. Because students are going to the staff members and saying, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And they're excellent at teaching in the classroom, but they don't have some of the expertise that a counselor is going to have. So there's another resource to them that takes something off of their plate as well. So there's multiple layers to this. To Carly's point earlier, when she was talking about the numbers of resources that some other schools have, we don't have that. That's been one of the things in my time here, is to try to figure out how do we get some more resources into our buildings to be able to support our staff and our students. And as I mentioned at the work session, when you go and talk to our high school students, they're frustrated, but they're not irritated. They're not mad. They understand why it is the way it is. They're just like, can you get us some additional help? Can you get my teacher some additional help? Because when I talk to them, they're like, well, I have the same issue. I can't get in to see this person, or I don't have the time to be able to do it because I'm doing these other things. So I think there's multiple layers to this with the counseling situation department at the high school that helps our students academically and supports them in a lot of ways, but it also helps our staff by helping them have some other supports and resources to help kids, and that's what they all want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and Carly's analogy was really good with Wayzata, and we've done those studies with all the South Metro schools. In Lakeville is by far the leanest with our counseling service administration support, if you will, having 4 people for that many students. You go to any other high school around us and look at the numbers of how many counselors and APs they have, and it's at least triple. And so just trying to get service to students, we know the needs are changing, and it's become a frustration point. We're at that tipping point where we're growing as a community that something's got to give, and that's where we're at. So,
Director Thompson?
So I do appreciate you sharing that. I think one of the things that we always need to think about is like, what are our students missing that we are either not doing it or asking an unlicensed or unqualified person to bridge the gap. And so if our students are not getting academic advising, if they're not getting college readiness, career readiness, either being a trade, starting a business, be a realtor, I don't know, whatever it may be, they're not having those conversations, and this would give them a pathway that post-high school, choose your own adventure, and there are different paths that you can take. So I appreciate that. But I do want to clarify, when you say the word counselor, what we've talked about is what that is, and there may be some folks in the community that might say, a counselor, is that a therapist? Do I send my kid to talk about their issues? Or I just want to make sure we understand the scope of what a counselor is and what it is not, so that we're on the same page.
yeah, and those roles have to be defined. I think Letterman, when he gave us our advice to explain what are we asking for, I think we have to be very clear on what a counselor is, and they service all students. And so it's really important. My daughter's taking some PSEO classes, for example, this year. Counselors go to trainings. Well, you can only go to so many trainings a year as a dean, as an AP. You go to Roger, who's our lobbyist for the state, for all the discipline updates that the new legislation has. Well, it'd be nice to get to the U of M to see what's happening with PSEO offerings. And counselors from all schools go to those. And when I was a dean, and I was a dean for 10 years, I went to those trainings. And I was the only administrator in there. They're all counselors from other high schools sitting in those trainings with me, and they're looking at me like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I'm doing the job of 2 people. And that's important to note, because for the community, well, how does this benefit me? Just like the DMV, me waiting in line, it's an extra person to service you. And for every avenue that you're doing in life and after high school, they're going to help guide you in those situations. And it's important that we have people with expertise to do that, and so we don't have just one person trying to cover it all.
Can I add one thing?
Yep.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. I think, to Sean's point, one of the things that we have to remember is by hiring licensed school counselors, they have a broad base of expertise. But the purpose is to actually have a person or people in the system whose primary role is meeting and working with students to meet their needs, to ensure that all the students in the high school are getting what they need in this area to be successful. Maybe, again, that is more of sort of like, I don't want to use the term therapist, but maybe it's an opportunity to help with some conflict resolution, or maybe they've experienced a trauma of some sort and they need someone to talk to. In addition to that, they're the person they're like their person. I'm going to go, they're going to help me in whatever way that I need to be helped. And not unlike what I was saying with the elementary, what that does then is it allows our APs to be more adult facing. They will deal with behavior, which is part of an assistant principal role, but they have opportunities alongside the principal then to really be able to understand and support the teachers in the way that they need to be supported on the day-to-day basis and be in the classrooms and help them in that way. So to have more of an adult-facing position and then more of a student-facing position really allows for that flexibility and that access that the kids just don't have right now.
Director Thompson?
I don't have any questions on the high school topic, but I'll pause here if there's other board members that have questions on this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, so we didn't talk about the art, media, digital, but I think in general there might be some consensus that we like the art, digital stuff here. High school counselors, sounds like there might be general alignment there, and elementary behavioral resources, maybe general alignment there. I do want to talk about the middle school, because the middle school is an additional, I think, like $1.5 million worth of additional tax revenue. And so this is the implementation of data-informed model. So that's a BAR model. I believe that's roughly $280,000. The addition of two additional counselors, which each middle school already has one counselor already. And so we just talked about the definition of a counselor, about academic advising, career readiness, college readiness. I don't know very many 6th, 7th graders are going to have those conversations. And so I just want to understand the value of 2 additional counselors in middle school. We've got 1 social worker is the ask, and then we already have 2 assistant principals and 1 counselor already in each middle school. So I'm just looking to better understand adding 2 additional counselors and the need to add 1 additional social worker at the middle school level for an additional $1.5 million in taxes.
Go first.
Sure. First of all, when I student taught in the middle school. I spent my career at the high school, but I student taught in the middle school. And even though it was, a dinosaur go in time, middle school is such a beautiful and Terry Lynn's laughing, beautiful and exciting time where kids are really figuring out who they are, who they want to be, what they're thinking about for the future, what they're passionate about. And then you combine that sort of self-development with sort of the physical aspects of what's going on when you're in middle school and puberty and all of those things. What you have is you have students that really need some adult guidance, some adult role models. They need someone to talk to. They need someone they can trust. And as they get through the middle school, towards the 7th, 8th grade, as they're getting up in the middle school years, you would maybe be surprised at how many kids are thinking about high school. Mm-hmm. They're thinking about, wow, I really have a passion for STEM, and what are my opportunities to do that? Right now, they don't really get a lot of guidance in that area because we have the same situation in the middle level that we have at the high school in terms of access to our deans and our APs and our principals, and they are very, very busy. When we talked with the high school students, actually this came up. We had a number of our high school focus groups were all grades, a variety of grades, and certainly the 9th grade and 10th grade students said, you know, I had to talk to my brother's friend because they were in XYZ and I was interested in that and I couldn't, you know, get in to talk to somebody about that. And so they, by 8th grade, they want access to information and support and help them talk through their planning and also help them like talk through if things are going on in their lives, someone that they can kind of lean on. And I would say, we've brought this up before, but specifically in middle school, it's really hard to have one person that is potentially your disciplinarian and then also supposed to be your support person. The combination of the two doesn't work in terms of building those relationships and setting those expectations for kids. So I would say, to answer the question, we're really looking to develop a systemic model in our secondary where students have access to more supports than they do right now by separating those positions and then providing those additional people per grade level to be able to do that.
So first we'll take Director David Anderson and then Director Kelleher.
So it seems like the counselor role.
Can you move into the mic?
So it seems like the counselor role at the middle school, it will be a little bit different than the counselor role, obviously, at the high school. And as the kids get older, it'll become more like the high school, like you said, in 8th grade. So for clarification for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point, David. Really, what we want to do is, again, having the benefit of a licensed counselor that has a broad base of skills in a wide variety of areas and has that high level of expertise. What we want to do is we want to look at the needs in the system. I think Director Thompson just made a comment about that. What are the needs in the system? And then what do we need to provide in order to meet those needs? So they might vary slightly. It's not like we're going to say, you have to do exactly what you're doing in the high school. That wouldn't make sense. But what is it, as we are doing our needs assessment, do we need, and what are then, how do the experts in the building prioritize those things to be able to make sure that they're happening?
So the other thing that I think is necessary to point out with the middle school is the fact that counselors would also probably be supporting a lot of parents and family decisions as well, only because a lot of the parents need help when it comes to time to register for high school and help them to transition and so forth. So to Director Anderson's point, the counselor operates differently under the same guise with career development or advancement and all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot of parent support too at that level, just helping the children transition from middle school to high school.
That's a good point, because there's a lot of kids that should not be taking online classes in 9th grade.
Director Carly Anderson.
So just to go back to the DMV example that Sean brought up earlier, are we seeing that same pressure at the middle school level right now with this?
Absolutely.
Because we have the school counselor. So is that same pressure there for?
We absolutely are. And, you know, although there's a lot of the work that's parallel, but there are different, again, needs at the middle school than there are at the high school. But the pressure of trying to do two jobs is real. And we've known that for a while, and we haven't been able to figure out exactly how to meet those needs. But I think having this type of a system would be really beneficial, not only for the kids and the families, but also for our staff and for our principals and our APs as well.
Dr. Van Zyl.
I think one of the things to take into account is we're not trying to pigeonhole a position. Mm-hmm. It's more like a bowling alley. It's going to have some bumpers on it to keep the council, hey, here's kind of the lane that you're in. Today you may be going down the right side, you may be going down the left side tomorrow, you may be trying to pick up a split. I'm not a bowler, but whatever that analogy stuff is. You know, to me, it's not necessarily trying to fit a person into a lockstep spot. It's given them the freedom with their professional licensure and experience to meet the needs of our kids and help support our staff. And that's what we're looking for. We've heard from several administrators that are talking about the lack of resources and support that our students and our kids have. And we're not reinventing the wheel. You know, these are proven strategies that have taken place in multiple schools across the state and across the country with these helps and supports. And as Emily and I have mentioned multiple times, our kids are asking for it. They don't know exactly what to call it, but they're asking for the help and support. Our staff is asking for the help and support. I think we're remiss if we don't take a look at it. Granted, we're just not trying to fly by the seat of our pants, but we are taking a look at things that actually have value, worth, and meaning, and we've seen it play out in many other schools, not only across the state of Minnesota, but other places as well. And our educational experts are saying they need help and support to be able to do it. So that's why we're presenting some of these things to you in the fashion that we are. Would that we had all the money in the world, there'd be a whole lot more behind this, but we have to be able to build some of these things in cooperation with one another. That's why the middle school needs to build up to the high school. The high school needs to have their help and support. Elementary needs to have their helps and support. So to try to be able to fix our system, as Emily kind of said, we're trying to take a look at all levels. We could say, hey, we're just going to do high school, but we know we've got issues at elementary. We know we've got issues at middle school. So we're trying to take these dollars and be as efficient and as effective as we can be across the system.
Director Thompson, did you have another question?
Yeah. So thank you for the additional information. We've got 2 assistant principals already in each middle school, and just from a numbers point of view, we've got roughly 800 or 900 kids in each middle school ballpark. We'll round up, and we'll be 900 on the conservative side. And so you've got 2 assistant principals, 900 students in each middle school, so they're managing 450. Comparing that to the high school model, you've got 4 assistant principals, roughly 500 kids in each grade, so they're managing roughly the same. I can make a case that probably 6th graders and 7th graders are more challenging than 9th graders. I don't know. But you've got 2 assistant principals already there. You've got 1 counselor already there. And if you've got roughly 900 in each middle school, I'm assuming 300 8th graders, 300 7th graders. So if you have 1 counselor that kind of provides that career academic readiness for those 8th graders, they're managing roughly 800 folks. I mean, 300 folks is where I'm trying to just do the math where, like, do we need a counselor for 300 1 counselor for 300 students, whereas for the high school, we've got 1 counselor for 500 students. And then at the elementary level, we've got 1 counselor already there for 500 students. So when we've got 300 in each grade level at the middle school level, I'm just, like, I think I'm more aligned by having a 2 deans or 2 assistant principals, 2 counselors, before we jump to 3 and 3. We have not seen it, play out at the high school level. We're about to move them all to 4 assistant principals, and now we're adding 4 more resources for 4 counselors. It might make sense for us to be prudent and just wait a year or 2, see how that model materializes, and then come back and see if additional assistant principals and a 3rd counselor might be warranted. But that's just thinking out loud, looking at the numbers and where we're at. We've only have, let me rephrase that, we've got a $6.4 million total tax authority available. And so what we spend, we want to be mindful that it impacts the most amount of students that we can, has the greatest impact in academic and success. And so, and we haven't even talked about other things, like we've got salary calibration for all district employees. We just went through a union negotiation, and we have yet to talk about what that might look like as a Levy 2 option or so. My crazy idea of adding a classroom assistant in every single elementary classroom so that it gets to the root cause before they go into middle school, so that we get them a success in academics. Funding for the new middle school is $2.5 million, potentially when that gets up and running. And then teacher mentorship, that's one area that I don't know if we can allocate or spend. So while those things that I just shared are not part of this proposal, I just want to be mindful that $4 million is making taxpayers spend 2.85% of the overall budget for our district. And so, I don't know, those are just a few thoughts. I'll pause here.
Were you going to share what Molly shared?
Yeah, just a quick, 2 things. I think that we all acknowledge that we have infinite needs in our system because our role is to help, tiny humans, sometimes not so tiny humans, get them out into the world in the best way that we can, to be the best people that they can be and to be able to follow their dreams. So infinite needs, and we have extremely finite resources. So part of the conversations that Doug and I have and our other executive team and our leadership team and even our teachers union, it's just we're always trying to figure out how do we get one step closer to where we need to best support our students. Where are our needs? Where can we plug in? What can we afford to do based on where we are from a budget standpoint at any given time? And then what do we need to advocate for through our referendum process or for other processes? So we're constantly trying to figure out how we can maximize not only the dollars we have, but maximize the experience for our students. And I will say, Sean said it, this area that we're talking about today, we are extremely behind. Our kids don't have access to what most, if not all, students have in the metro area related to counselors and behavior support. So I say that because that is one of the reasons why this plan materialized, is through those conversations and trying to figure out, which apple are we going to pick off the tree today and which problem are we going to try to solve. And we know that right now this is an area in which we are not only under-resourced significantly, but also an area where we're seeing students' needs increase, especially since COVID. That said, I also just want to make a point of clarification. At the middle school, we have 2 assistant principals. We have no counselors. The additional 2 counselors would even out to what we have at the high school, so they would pair up like we would have at the high school. And then the additional person would be the social worker. So the third person is the social worker position, not the counselor position. So I don't know, Doug, if you want to add anything.
I think that we just wanted to clarify that. And I think from the vantage point that we're in, as Emily said, this is the conversation we've been having on how do we provide supports to our students, how do we provide support to our staff. We're working with a finite set of dollars, and again, I guess I would say this: the educational experts are who we've talked to, and those are the folks in the classrooms, those are the administrators that stood in front of you, those are the students that are experiencing what they experience in our schools on a daily basis. So this isn't Doug saying, hey, this is something we need to do, or Emily saying this is something we need to do. This is coming from the people that are in it every day in the building saying they need some additional helps and supports. And I guess I would just say this: waiting is not going to be a good answer, in my opinion, because waiting, you're going to be asking for another levy on top of other levies that you either have to renew. The things that we're proposing, the things that we're talking about are not untested. They are not unresourced in other districts to be able to support our students. We're not saying, hey, do something that is on the bleeding edge of something. We're not even on the cutting edge. We're behind. We're working with a dull blade. When you're talking about the number of supports that other districts have, that's what we hear from our staff. I other than, I understand salaries are what they are, but they take a look at what other helps and supports can they get in other places, and we are lagging behind in a majority of them. And so we've got to start someplace. You got to tip the first domino for the second domino to fall.
Director Kelleher.
So I think it has to be mentioned that if we're trying to mirror the middle school to the high school and look at it on a numbers basis, it's not going to work. I think we are woefully understaffed in these areas in the high school, and that doesn't mean we should then also be woefully understaffed at the middle school. If we can do something for the middle school to help us, and they have been really kind of put on the back burner for many years when it comes to the staff, I think that we should. I think this is an investment that's well worth it. And it is a proven model. We've talked about Wayzata and the other school districts that they've all looked at and studied across the South Metro that has this in place. So it is a proven model. And the sooner we can put it into play here for our students and our families, the one thing that this district has always done very well is taking a look at positions and figuring out how to tweak and change them to be more effective for us and to also be more efficient for us. And so the sooner we can invest in that, we can start our own processes of improvement and continue to modify our programs and our budgets as need fit for down the road. And I do know we have a limited amount of resources, and we do need to share that with our community. But I think after our discussion that we had at our work session, it was pretty clear that these are resources we need to invest in now and not go to the cap. So we are being thoughtful of not going to the cap, but we're also being very thoughtful of the fact that we need to be able to support our students and our family and work toward our strategic goal of academic improvements and continuous improvement. And I think this is that next step.
So before we take more questions or comments, I just want to be mindful of the time that we've taken on this discussion. And I kind of feel like we're discussing the same points that we've already discussed. Like we're kind of getting there. And I feel like everybody feels and understands that these supports are necessary, that our schools need this. This is something that we definitely need. But I also understand Director Thompson's point that we do want to pay our staff more, and that's something that the board has been concerned about for a while, and not just teachers, but cooks and janitors and grounds workers and paras. We want to make sure everyone gets a bump in pay, but there's only so much we can do at one time, and this is one step in the right direction. If you looked at the earlier slides that we had on there, we do have bond referendums coming up and other levies coming up as well. So, I mean, those are things that we can continue to address in the future. But right now, we are completely behind when it comes to these types of supports. And the students are the ones that are paying the price, and the teachers are trying to hold up a ship that's sinking. So I don't know if we need any more discussion on this. I'm just curious if the board is ready to ask for a motion to approve. Director Thompson?
Just one more clarity, I apologize. So we do not have counselors in middle schools today, or plan to have counselors in middle schools this coming November, or this fall, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so the two additionals to pair up the two assistant principals, two counselors, and then add a social worker on top of that. Okay.
Correct.
And then one last clarification. This is stuff that we've already talked to EML leadership. This is what they aligned with as well. So we're good in partnership with them, and they don't need anything else. Like, this is what they recommended.
We met with them several different times. There's more things on the list, but several of those things don't necessarily align with being able to meet the needs of multiple layers. There's some things that are a little bit more specific. Special education is one of those areas that they talked about as well. The challenge with some of those things, class size, for example, or the amount of dollars that it takes to be able to do that. Knowing that this was something that these were also areas that they agree to. I can't tell you that they're going to say these are their number one top priorities, but anything that's supporting staff, supporting students, and falls within the realm of the EML contract, their members in their association rather than administrative, are a much more positive step in that direction with them.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, so one of the things that I keep hearing that has been a high value item for teachers is a mentorship program. And so do we have a mentorship program? Is it in development? How much would it cost that you might need to have it fully functional and ready to rock and roll? What does it even look like?
Yeah, Dr. McDonald's already been working on that and has it built into the budget. We're just waiting for the budget to be approved from the state, and it'll be taken care of. We haven't had a robust mentoring program. That's something EML has talked to us about, and I've shared with them we're working on it. It's about $175,000, and Emily and her team have worked on putting that in place. So that's why that's not a part of this.
So if that gets approved, it's something that we'll have funding for I don't want to say forever, but for a duration.
We have a two-phase plan. The funding that we're talking about utilizing on the onset is through our Title II program, which there is a provision that allows for us to be able to utilize those dollars for a mentor program if we don't have one. We have a robust onboarding for our new teachers, but we don't have the supports are only provided through the building and not at the district level. So our two-phase plan is really about building over the course of 2 years to have a more robust support for all of our new teachers, not only in their first year, but in their first 3 years. And then delineating between those that are brand new teachers straight out of school and those that maybe have experience and are coming to us after 5 or 10 years. So where we are with that is, as Dr. Van Zyl said, our plan has been submitted June 30. It has to be approved by the state. If they approve it, then we'll be in a place to communicate around it, but we haven't communicated around it because we're waiting for that approval to happen before we take our next step.
Dr. Van Zyl, and then.
I'm good.
Okay. Director Carly Anderson.
I know we've been here and we're talking about this. I simply want to make the point that last year when we had our levy, it was not a unanimous vote for question 2. It did not pass. And when Peter was here, he talked about the importance of a unanimous vote. So if there are any lingering questions that might help, I want to make sure not to rush where people don't vote in favor because they don't have all the information that they need.
I agree with that, but I think we're trying to add on proposals to, and I just want to keep it on the topic on the proposals that are actually on the table.
That we discussed during the work
Correct.
session.
Correct. Not additionals. Do you have any questions related to the ones that are on the table already?
No, I don't. But we're about to spend $4 million of taxpayer money. Times that by 10 years is $40 million. $40 million, and so it's not something that we should rush into. We just started discussing about this last week. I brought teacher mentorship program up because if it doesn't succeed, if it doesn't get approved, then we don't have one. And so
Couple of things. Number one,
we added.
when you
That's
take a
what I'm
look at the dollars that you're asking about in regard to this, you're asking the community to either vote to approve it or not approve it. You as a board are not making that decision. You're asking the community to say, these are the things that we're communicating to you that we believe our staff and our students need. So you're giving the power to the people to be able to say, do you want to do it? You as a board are not doing that. The second component to that, in regard to the mentoring aspect of that, with any of these, if you try to put them in place and we don't get the money as part of the levy, you're not going to have them. We're trying to figure out ways, like with the mentoring program, to be able to build it, that we can do it without the mentoring dollars, or without the levy dollars to be able to do it. These bigger ticket items, we have to have the levy dollars to be able to do it, and you're just providing the opportunity for the people to be able to vote on if they want that for our students in our school district.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, we as a board is kind of a stage gate one in things that get reviewed before it goes to the community. And so, like Carly said, we should be aligned with what we want to bring forward. I do hear teacher mentoring is a big component, and to help offset any unfavorable decisions, this would help at least provide another pathway if that is something that's a value need for the district.
But the mentorship program is most likely going to get approved by the state through the budget.
Well, I wouldn't want to say either way.
Well, let's say
It's always a little dicey with the state of Minnesota. Here's what I'll say. The reality is that I have had, Carrie and I have had many conversations about this. Our exec team and their exec team have had a lot of conversations about it. Our commitment remains that we want this for our staff. This is not something that we're like, we don't agree with it, we don't want it, we want it. What we're trying to do right now is creatively figure out within the budgets that we have, specifically our restricted dollar budgets like title, if we can reallocate, which means, again, something goes away, but we reallocate our dollars to meet the needs of the organization to the best of our ability. So here's what I will say, David. If it doesn't get approved, then we're back at the drawing board. We're not people that just, wave our hands and give up. We're going to go back and we're going to try to figure out if we can, when we can, how we do it, what does that look like. So we are committed to this. We're in a place where we might be able to take some action around it. But regardless, we want this for our new teachers, for sure.
It's required by statute, so.
Chair
have membership in
Baker, I
place.
think it should also be recognized that Minnesota School Board Association, this is in their platform as well for lobbying at the state level for mentoring programs for our public schools. So that is something that's being lobbied for.
Director Thompson?
For a mentor program.
Additional money, funding?
For any organization that you work at, a career succession plan, a career growth plan, mentorship program is a key foundation, and that we don't have one as active and as solid as we may like to. I would be open to adding that as part of the proposal to make it at 4.2 versus 4. That way, you've got the community as to make that choice as well. So, because here's the deal: if it doesn't get approved, then we don't have one. The fact that we're not helping educate 800 of our staff seems not appropriate. So
just one clarification. Right now, the mentoring of new staff is handled at the building, which means we don't necessarily have consistency across the system. So it's not like they are just 100% left to their own devices. A lot of times we have teams, their team takes them under their wing, their content partner at the secondary takes them under their wing. Some buildings have some supports that they have sort of funded through their own means at the building level. So there are things happening. It's just that what we need is a consistent system across the district that guarantees the type of experience that we want for our new teachers. So if that is not, if the title application is not the mechanism to do that, then as I said, we have to continue the conversation about how do we make this happen and in what way and what's our timeline. And is it going to happen right away? It's hard to say, but certainly we would love to see this come to fruition. And if that means that when we go to our next budgeting cycle that we have to look at what we do to be able to support that, then that's part of the conversation. But yes, we're fingers crossed. We'll hope that we get a positive outcome and we can start our 2-year process.
Are we good? Or do we have more questions? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion?
So I will make a motion to call for the resolution, or call for the addition of a levy to the November ballot as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table from Director Kelleher. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion or questions on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. Sure, go ahead.
Every time. Yes.
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 All right, motion passes. So the next item, we have some additions to the agenda tonight. There were 2 additions. One would be high school counselors for 2024, and the other one is an HR audit board subcommittee. So we'll start with the first one, high school counselors for 2024. Director Thompson, can you tell us more about that item and why you wish to add it to the agenda tonight?
Yes, there are 3 counselors starting this fall. I believe that to set them up to be successful, they should have 4. So I would like to make a motion to allocate $300,000 from our general fund so that the high schools all have 4 starting this fall.
Do we have any discussion on this item? Director Carly Anderson?
I think one thing that you asked earlier was whether that hiring would be possible. Does that seem like a reasonable thing to hire if we were to approve that?
I visited with our high school administrators, and I visited with Bill Holmgren as well. The issue becomes that those dollars, of course, are not built into the budget, so they would be coming out of your reserve fund. And if we don't get additional dollars, and then it's going to continue to come out of that reserve fund into fruition or make reductions someplace else. One of the things that I visited with Sean and Kim about was waiting until October 1st on our count date. And if our count is up high enough and we have the additional dollars to be able to do that, they could look at getting that 4th counselor probably at semester, which is probably an easier time to be able to have some folks coming out and doing that. Is that accurate, Sean? Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah, come on up. And so I don't disagree with what you're saying. We also want to be able to fiscally be able to support it, because if we're not able to do it and you're pulling money out of reserve on an ongoing basis, that creates a downward cycle. That's why we were taking a look at October 1st count. And if the count was high enough, we had enough dollars, we could come back to y'all and say, we've got some additional dollars coming because our student growth was high enough, and we could take a look at adding that position. So Sean?
Yeah, and for this year, it's a transition year. We are working with the counselors because we didn't want to just throw them out into this very high caseload and drowned. We have 6 new people starting this job, and we want them to be successful, and we want them to have a good experience, and we want our students to have a good experience. And so our deans are going to be doing a lot of double duty and at both North and South, and helping them, especially with our seniors, because our seniors have had their deans for 3 years, and they don't all of a sudden want to just start from scratch and have a counselor. So we're trying to phase it in. And so phasing in these 3 counselors to focus more on 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and having our deans see through their seniors is a big piece to this. But yeah, thank you for that motion.
I don't think I answered Carly's question. We couldn't tell you for sure that we'd be able to have somebody to be able to, because counselors are not just laying around on a street corner, to be able to pick them up. So we've been fortunate enough that we found some quality folks as we were able to do that, but we can't guarantee that if that were to be the case. We should sure try, but we're just also not going to put a warm body in there. We're going to find the right people.
Director Thompson?
So I apologize. Are you saying that we could not find someone by then, before school starts?
No, I'm not saying that. They could try, but I can't guarantee it. Just like any other positions, we're winding down in that time of the year where people are kind of locking their positions in, staying where they are. We started earlier in the year to be able to find the counselors that we have, and I don't know that there was a big pool after that of people wanting to come forward, but I know Sean and Kim did the interviewing for that. There's always a chance. It just takes one, well, it would be 2, that you'd have to find to be able to do that.
Well, let's do the compromise at the semester then.
Well, so thank you for that. But if we're anticipating 200 additional students, is that what Bill's waiting for, to see if the resources would be there to
Yes,
fund
he
for
was,
that?
based off of his budget, he built in roughly 200 new students. So if it goes above that and it creates some additional dollars, he's much more comfortable saying, hey, we can stretch this a little bit. Maybe it's 150,000 that we have to come up with instead of 300,000 or something of that. So I don't know the exact numbers of that, but I know that in my conversation with him, that's what he doesn't want to start the downward slide of spending dollars out of the general fund that we don't have.
I understand that. I think my interpretation would be it would be a one-time allocation, for an extra $250 or $300 allocation, $300,000 allocation for this year, and to set the stage that we're set up. And then next year, if we see it successful in its optimal state, and we want to continue it on, then when we get to the budget discussion in next June, July, we can decide how we maintain the $300,000 for that, if the levy passes, if we need to do some budget allocation changes. I just want to make sure that if we're going to do this, let's make sure that we've got the right optimal model, set it up correctly. I get that we may not be able to find someone. We can wait until October, November, but by the time we bring someone on board, it might take a little bit longer. I don't know. Yeah, my recommendation is a one-time funding to give you the option to go see if you can find one, and let the community choose in November if they want to add that forth.
I guess I would say there's no guarantee that it's just one-time funding, because you don't have a revenue source coming in to offset it. You're going to have to make a reduction someplace
It'd be
else.
a reduction out of the general
So it'd have to be,
fund, I believe
so it'd
we're
have to be, yeah, so it either comes out of your general fund balance into fruition,
Yep.
or you have to have a revenue or a reduction to offset it. So just to say a one-time expenditure, is not 100% accurate, because it depends on where those dollars would come from. If we didn't have new revenue to offset it, either we'd have to find it in somebody's budget, or we'd have to have an increase in the budget someplace else
Yep.
to be able to offset it.
Yep.
So are you making a motion?
Yeah,
Already
that'd be my
did.
motion.
Already did.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a second to that motion?
No.
I think it's a good compromise to wait until
I'll
October.
I'll make the modification if we wait until like November.
What?
So you want to modify the original motion to be that we,
There's another modify.
We don't need to make a
We don't need
motion,
to
though.
make
We
a
can just wait and have the discussion then to see what it looks like once the student count comes in and discuss it at that point.
I will withdraw my motion.
all right,
Problem solved.
That's a good point.
awesome. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the HR Audit Board Subcommittee that was added by Director Thompson. Can
Yeah, I
you
do want to see if we
talk
can
about
add
that?
it to the next board meeting. Obviously with some changes upcoming, like the board to have it on the agenda for a working session topic around having an HR Audit Board Subcommittee as we navigate this upcoming school year. Just want to make sure that the board has participation, awareness, oversight as key roles are placed within the district as we move forward. And so I just want to make sure that, is that something that we can add to the agenda topic at the next working session?
Clarification. You want to add this to a work session?
Yes.
Why do we have to do it here? I mean, we just call her up and add it to a work session.
I did offer that
Yeah.
when he asked to
I
add
want
it
to make
to
sure
the
that
agenda.
it's added to the
Oh,
working
yeah, I know
session
you
for
did.
us.
Yeah,
So,
Okay.
yep. Okay, I've got it added to the next work session.
thanks.
All right, so that concludes our additions to the agenda, so we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Just very quickly, of course, our summer activities are still taking place, winding down in some of our areas. Hard to believe we're into August. I did want to highlight again, Ready, Set, Achieve. If you're interested in being involved in that, that is a great opportunity to be involved with a lot of our families and our students. And so if you want to be involved in that activity, please make sure you're able to be aware of that. Other than that, we've been here for a while. That's my biggest thing, just to be able to highlight for y'all to be able, if you want to be involved, let us know. We'll get you in contact with the people that can get you involved in that activity.
All right, sounds great. That's a wonderful event to volunteer for, and it's a nice way to
Donate
connect.
too.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can donate as well.
You can donate items as well. I think they have a list on the website of things that you can donate.
Or cash.
Right. Ready, set, achieve. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Director Carly Anderson and a second by Director David Anderson. Any discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.